controversial Dutch politician Geert Wilders has won a massive victory in the recent elections in the Netherlands. It puts his party and himself in a position to form the next ruling party and potentially become the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Wilders has often been called the Dutch Donald Trump for his brand of populist politics. But unlike the former US president, he seemed destined to a lifetime in the opposition. An exit poll revealing the landslide victory appeared to take Wilders by surprise. In his first reaction posted in a video on the social media platform X, he spread his arms wide, put his face in his hands, and simply said 35. That's the number of seats that an exit poll had forecast for his Party for Freedom, or the PVV. That's the number it could eventually win in the 150-seat lower house of parliament.
I'm in politics for 25 years now, and this is the happiest day of my life so far in politics. We became the #1 party by far. I mean, it's what a lot of people, if you would have asked them a year ago, would call you mad, and it happened today. So I'm very proud, I'm very happy, and it brings along a lot of feeling of responsibility.
This is the first time a coalition of right-wing parties could potentially form a government in Amsterdam. The only time Geert Wilders came close to governing was when he supported the first coalition government formed by the outgoing Prime Minister Mark Rutte in the year 2010. But Wilders did not formally join that minority government. It was a left-of-centre government, and oftentimes Wilders' politics did not sit well with the government of the day. Wilders brought down Rutte's government just after 18 months in office. There was a dispute between both gentlemen over austerity measures, which the Netherlands was going through at that point of time. Since then, mainstream political parties in the Netherlands have shunned Geert Wilders. He was the guy who was good for television soundbites and social media viral posts, but someone that mainstream politicians did not take seriously because of his extremely radical views. Wilders' party, the PVV, is now in a fantastic position to emerge as the single largest in a fractured mandate. They could win potentially up to 35 seats. They could either be the leading party in the next ruling coalition, or at least a party that can no longer be ignored by any other party that intends to form the next government. Wilders, in fact, waved and spoke to cheering supporters at his election headquarters celebration. It happened in a small bar in a suburb at The Hague. Wilders' incendiary rhetoric against Islam has made him a target for extremists. It has led him to living round-the-clock protection for a number of years now. He's also appeared in court as a victim of death threats, vowing never to be silenced. He has moved from one safe house to another over the last 20 years. In fact, in 2009, the British government had refused to let him visit that country, saying that he posed a threat to communal harmony and therefore to public security. To court mainstream voters this time around, Wilders toned down his rhetoric and sought to focus less on what he calls the de-Islamization of the Netherlands. Instead, he focused more on tackling practical issues like housing shortages, a cost of living crisis, and of course, access to good health care. His campaign platform, nonetheless, calls for a referendum in the Netherlands. The question that will be asked before the Dutch people is whether they want to stay or leave the European Union. He also wants a complete stop to all asylum seekers in the Netherlands and no Islamic schools, Qurans, or mosques. But soon after his victory, when he spoke to his supporters, he pledged not to breach any existing laws in the Netherlands or to breach the country's constitution. Remember, in the Netherlands, there is freedom of religion and expression, which is enshrined in the Dutch constitution.
I'm very proud, but at the same time, it comes with a lot of responsibility. People expect our agenda of hope, tougher asylum and immigration policy, the people getting more money to pay for their utilities and groceries.
Wilders has previously ranted against Islam. He's also hit out against asylum seekers who come in boats from the Middle East as well as from North Africa. He has also said very disparaging things about Prophet Muhammad, the founder of the Islamic religion. He has also backed an Indian politician last year who had called the Prophet a pedophile. But Wilders' rise is not alone. It mirrors something that's been going on in Europe since the Brexit referendum in 2016 in Britain. That was the first time in continental Europe where an anti-immigrant and an anti-Europe, and most importantly, an anti-multicultural sentiment came to the mainstream. It led to the election of the very populist London mayor at that time, who went on to become Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. In fact, the current Conservative government under Rishi Sunak has been battling its biggest crisis since it came to existence over a year ago, post the exit of the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Braverman had made it her single-point agenda to stop the boats. In fact, she had to exit her job after a controversial plan to send back migrants to Rwanda, which ran afoul of the courts in Britain. The Supreme Court of Britain just this past week struck that controversial plan down, saying it is illegal and unconstitutional. Not just in Britain, across the Channel, in France, Marine Le Pen has emerged as a formidable contender for the presidency. She has positioned herself as a challenger not just to the incumbent president, but also to the existing political order. In the last two elections, she finished as runner-up, forcing the establishment candidate, the current incumbent, Emmanuel Macron, into runoffs on both occasions. Her rise reflects a growing sentiment of discontent in France with mainstream politics and with mainstream politicians. She, just like Wilders, is capitalizing on an anti-immigrant, anti-Islamic platform. The French political arena is witnessing a departure from what was traditionally centrist ideologues, now with Le Pen's National Front gaining traction in both local elections as well as nationwide elections. There is a large set of voters who are disillusioned with the status quo, who are now gravitating towards this far-right option. Similarly, in Italy, Giorgia Meloni now heads one of the most right-wing governments in the history of that nation. The shift to the right reflects a broader trend of Euroscepticism and a rejection of liberal values that have defined Europe for the last many decades. Meloni's ascent to power underscores the growing influence of far-right ideologies, tapping into public apprehensions about immigration and cultural change. Now, the common thread binding these movements is an emphasis on anti-Islamic and anti-immigrant rhetoric, and that poses a fundamental challenge to the founding principles of multiculturalism in Europe. The rise of extreme right-wing parties across the continent underscores a broader trend of populism as well as a re-evaluation of established political norms. And as these far-right political movements gain momentum, Europe finds itself at a crossroads. It now has to reorient its foundational principles. These principles have served the continent well since at least the end of the Second World War.